Which American city do you think has the highest murder rate? You might imagine that it's Chicago or Atlanta. What about Los Angeles or Birmingham, Alabama? No. Tragically, the city with the highest murder rate in the United States is Jackson, Mississippi. Only last weekend there were a total of 6 homicides in our capital city. That means that so far this year, a tragic total of 55 people have lost their lives due to homicide. Last year, in 2021, a total of 155 people living in Jackson were the victims of homicide. Now that's the same number of murders in Jackson, Mississippi as in Atlanta, Georgia, a city with 4 times the number of people. As a new arrival to Jackson, Mississippi, and as someone who is proud to call Jackson my home, I don't find the homicide rate shocking. What I really find shocking is the attitude of some authorities to these grisly statistics. Some officials invoke that catch-all excuse for every public policy failure, COVID. It's certainly true that the murder rate in Jackson rose exponentially during the pandemic, but I've yet to see any evidence that the virus itself causes people to become more violent. The progressive media report on the shootings, but every time they do so, they seem to go out of their way to not hold to account the city leadership. Right across the political spectrum, there seems to be an awful lot of wishful thinking when it comes to crime. How often do we hear it suggested that if only we had one more rehabilitation program, all would be well? Or if only another bill was passed that would supposedly help ex-offenders, somehow that would cut crime. Sadly, such good intentions don't cut crime. What might cut crime is a little bit of honesty about the causes of crime. Next time there is a murder, I have no doubt that Jackson City leadership will emote. What we need to hear instead is a list of things that they're actually going to do to cut the homicide rate. Here are 5 things that we at the Mississippi Center for Public Policy believe are essential to cut crime in Jackson, Mississippi. Number 1, more police. Despite the heroic efforts of individual law officers, there simply aren't enough of them. Secondly, we need to prosecute. I know many people in Jackson who will tell you stories about how people who've done them wrong have been allowed to walk free. We need to be as effective at chasing wrongdoers through the courts as the police are at chasing them through the streets. Thirdly, we need detention facilities. It's absurd that wrongdoers are allowed to go free because we haven't built enough detention capacity. Fourthly, we need to clear the courts. The bureaucratic backlog in the court system here in Hinds County means that the criminal justice system isn't delivering justice. If the people who administer the courts can't cope, we need to appoint administrators who can. Last but not least, Jackson City leadership needs to work with Mississippi State leadership. Now, I get that city officials want to run their own affairs, but the fact is that Jackson is our capital city, and if they can't cope with the homicide rate, they need to call on the expertise and the resources of state officials who can help them. They need to be prepared to swallow their pride for the good of Jackson. I live and work in Jackson, and as you could probably tell from my accent, I'm quite a new arrival. But I love to think of Jackson as my home. It's easy to despair and assume that Jackson is in some downward spiral. But so too was New York in the 1980s, and look what happened there. When they got a grip on crime, they started to see the city recover. The key to renewing Jackson is to get a grip over the murder rate, to get a grip on crime.